Sorry, that was aggressive. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm calling this meeting of the Tax Committee back to order for April 3rd, 2023. Thanks for making it back, everyone. April 4th? Yes, April 4th, 2023. No, thank you. Thank you for, it's a team sport up here. So our final bill for the day is House File 2887, Representative Hornstein. Thank you for being here. Okay. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to move that House File 2887, the first engrossment, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. Representative Hornstein, I understand there's an author's amendment, the A31.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, members, for hearing House File 2887. And I just wanted to give a very quick overview of the A31. And of course, I believe Mr. Williams can also help out as well. Sean is here and can help out as well. But this is a amendment that incorporates feedback that we've received on the delivery fee specifically, and allows businesses to pay for the fee rather than passing it on to purchasers if they choose, clarifies when the fee is refundable, adds small business exemptions, allows third parties to collect the fee. It adjusts the allocation percentages and appropriations in light of decreased revenue with these changes. That's all the numbers you see on the first page, first and second, in the beginning of the second page. And then the other part, we add a small cities allocation in the first year before the tax revenue ramps up, since they're the only recipient who does not currently have dedicated funding from other sources. And on this matter, I did want to thank Representative Brand and Representative Olson, who are members of the Transportation Committee, who worked on, who brought, among many members actually, who brought the issue of small cities funding to our committee. So this corrects a problem that we weren't able to do in the Transportation Committee on the small cities funding. So that's the A31, and if
Thank you.
members have any other questions, Sean Williams is available.
Thank you very much, Representative Hornstein. Ms. Hagler's here, who can answer questions. Is there any member question or discussion on the A31 before we adopt it? Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the chair. One question. So I'm looking at the delivery fees and the exemptions, retail sales of less than $1 million, or a marketplace provider. So that'd be something like eBay, or that'd be something like Facebook Marketplace. If a retailer makes less than $100,000, then they wouldn't have to have that charge that delivery fee. But my question would be, how does this involve? So Amazon, for example, they do their own delivery. So it's very easy for us to identify and track that Amazon is in fact delivering their packages. But if a retailer, business, someone is using the United States Postal Service, for example, how are we tracking that delivery? How do we know that that's happening? How are we just assuming that the retailers are knowing that this is what it is, and even though they ship everything to the United States Postal Service, or are we actually charging delivery fees to the United States Postal Service, which I don't think we can do since that's a federal entity.
Chair Hornstein, I see that Chair Cagle has joined you. I don't know if we want to go to Chair Cagle and then see if Ms. Hagler has anything to fill in, or yeah, Chair Hornstein.
Just for some perspective here, and we will have Chair Cagle, since this is from House File 580. Chair Cagle is the author. I did want to mention that, again, this particular amendment comes to us from very specifically from small businesses who had concerns about some of the provisions in the bill. But I will have Chair Cagle respond to that.
Chair Cagle, welcome to the committee. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Olson. So it doesn't matter how it's delivered, it just matters how it's purchased. And so if you purchase an item through Amazon, Amazon is the one that's going to be administering the fee. If it's DoorDash, then DoorDash is the one who's going to be administering the fee. If it's through Target, then it's going to be Target. It doesn't matter if they deliver it, via drone or mail. It's the retailer who is administering the fee.
Representative Olson.
Thank you. So then I guess my follow-up to that is, how are we assuring or tracking that is in fact being done? Internet sales are one thing, but what if I call someone up on the phone and say, hey, can you just drop this in the mail for me? How are we tracking this? How do we know that this is happening?
Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Olson, we usually do those purchases online, like with our credit cards or something like that. I mean, if you're asking a friend to mail you something, then they're going to be exempt because they're not a retailer. You know, if it's marketplace and like Facebook Marketplace or whatever, like that's just not going to be tracked. But it is going to be tracked through the retailers, through the marketplace apps like DoorDash, Uber Eats, Amazon, whatever case may be.
Representative Olson, you good? Okay, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question I kind of got in here. How does that work with an eBay seller?
Chair Cagle.
Thank you, Chair and Representative. So an eBay seller, so if it, like, when my husband sells like window parts on eBay, unless he hits up to $100,000 selling through eBay, it won't trigger it.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What if you're a retailer that resides outside of Minnesota and you're just a single place that sells over $100,000?
Chair Cagle.
Madam Chair, if it is sold to a location within Minnesota, then I believe the then the delivery fee applies.
Representative Swedzinski.
Madam Chair, how is an outside retailer, let's say you're just Joe's mom shop that sells cheese curds in Wisconsin, and you have $100,000 in sales, how is the Department of Revenue going to communicate with that particular outlet? If it's just a one-shop spot that happens to sell $100,000 in Minnesota, how are they even going to know that exists?
Chair Cagle.
What's that process look like?
Madam Chair, so they're already remitting some sort of tax in the state. And so what it would do is that if they remitted over $1 million of sales in Minnesota the previous year, then that fee would then have to apply to them.
Representative.
I believe if I'm mistaken on any of this too, we can have fiscal staff correct me.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then just with auto parts, so oftentimes you'll see auto parts store do deliveries from their auto parts store to the retailer, which is the person that's actually doing the repairs. How will that possibly work?
Representative Cagle.
Madam Chair, so I believe business to business is exempt, or wholesale is not in there. It's from it's retail to customer. And so I don't know if Ms. Hagler would want to clarify any of that.
Ms. Hagler?
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, so the fee would kind of like attach with the sales tax. So if sales tax is charged at that point, then the fee being collected from the customer who's paying the sales tax on the part would also be paying the fee. That makes sense.
Representative Swedzinski.
So Madam Chair, if I understand it, it's like all taxes that ultimately just gets passed down to the customer?
Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, yes, however, there is a provision, I believe, in the amendment that allows the retailer to cover the cost themselves instead of passing it on to customers, so they can either collect it from the purchaser or choose to remit it themselves.
Representative Swedzinski.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Next up on the A31, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chair Hornstein. So following a little bit this line of questioning, so you said that, and Chair Cagle, that if it's done by the delivery organization, right? So if someone orders something from Jimmy John's and that's the retailer, but it's delivered by DoorDash, that's where I'm lost. So does the Jimmy John's put it on their, receipt or then and charge it to DoorDash, or does DoorDash put it on their fee? So if you could explain how it works from a retailer to a delivery service to a customer.
Chair Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative Robbins. So whoever you're paying. So if I go on my app and I order Jimmy John's on a DoorDash app, DoorDash is collecting the payment, and so then they would remit the delivery fee.
Representative Robbins.
Yes, thank you. So I think just going forward, because the language says retailer, so to me, that's not super clear, and especially on the business-to-business transactions, if I have a lot of customers in my district who are restaurants and they have, standing orders with other suppliers. And if they change their order, does that mean that every time they change their order, it's another delivery fee? Or, and does the restaurant owner pay the fee to the business they're purchasing the supplies from? Or I just see this all getting passed on to consumers and being super inflationary. So how would a restaurant deal with that?
Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A restaurant would put the delivery fee on any kind of meal they delivered to a customer.
Representative Robbins.
Perfect. I get that. But at the further upstream, if the restaurant is ordering from a supplier, they're still the retailer. So are they paying a delivery fee for the supplier's stuff that's coming in their door?
Chair Cagle.
I believe that, thank you, Madam Chair. So I believe that's wholesale. So we're just talking, maybe Ms. Hagler can kind of.
Yeah, maybe Ms. Hagler can talk to us about sales between businesses. That's the question, Representative Robbins.
Madam Chair and members, so if the restaurant has a contract with their supplier and they're getting supplies for the restaurant, they're not paying sales tax on those supplies, so there wouldn't be a fee from the wholesale supplier to the restaurant. It would just be from the restaurant to the person consuming the meal.
Representative Robbins.
Okay, that's good to know. Is there a section in here that shows that? Because I did not see anything directly about wholesalers. That's all about retailers.
Ms. Hagler?
Madam Chair and members, sorry, I'm just trying to find the line here, but the provisions are written so that when a sales tax is charged on a retail delivery, the fee is charged. So if there is no sales tax, then there's no fee.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it looks like this is structured such that if a business has a sales tax liability of taxable sales, that's what triggers this. Is that correct?
Ms. Hagler? Or should I go to the, that was directed at the author or directed at?
Whoever.
I would say Ms. Hagler.
Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, can you just repeat your question?
So, thank you. So it looks like this is triggered because there's a threshold. This is triggered when a business entity, delivery, whatever they are, or hits $1 million in the previous year of taxable sales. Is that word? Is that correct?
Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, yes, the $1 million exemption under Section 6, Subdivision 2 would be retail sales for $1 million of retail sales in the previous year. So I suppose there could be a situation where they make a retail sale of non-taxable items, and they hit that $1 million. And so if they are making delivery sales, then they would have to, if they're making delivery sales of taxable items, then they would have to remit the fee. So I guess the $1 million threshold is for all sales, all retail sales, but the fee is only for a taxable item.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It sounds like this isn't real laid out. So if a business hits $1 million in retail sales, period, whether they're taxable or not, food, clothing, non-taxable services, et cetera, then this is triggered that a business is told then by the Department of Revenue that they need to charge a delivery fee for any taxable items or non-taxable items? Because you still have clothing, you have groceries, you have things that are not taxable. And so how is that tracked, determined? I don't know how you could possibly do that.
Ms. Hagler?
Madam Chair and members,
Maybe we'll go
so
to the-
I think the department would probably need to speak to the logistics of that,
That
but
would be great.
the fee is triggered for taxable items, but clothing is included in that. So food, like groceries, non-taxable groceries would not be included, but if you are getting a delivery of clothing, even though that is exempt from sales tax, that's one of the only products that incurs the fee. Only non-taxable product that incurs the fee.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go to Chair Cagle, quick.
And thank you, Madam Chair and members. So I've been kind of affectionately calling this bill my Taylor Swift anti-hero bill because it's me. I'm the problem. And so the whole thing that around not exempting clothing is because you can get some really expensive stuff through the mail with clothing. But one of it is because I, just in my own personal experiences, I'll buy some sweater off of Target.com and then get it to my house and realize it's a crop top or something and then just send it back. And so I thought it was pretty important, especially the volume of clothing that is sent through the mail. I don't know the last time I actually bought a piece of clothing in a store. And so that's really where why we put clothing in there as well.
Representative Anderson.
Maybe perhaps Revenue can answer the logistical question, because I think this is a logistical nightmare. Yeah.
Welcome to the committee, Ms. Bears.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Joanna Bears. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Revenue. And Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, to your question. So I think what I hear your question to be.
I can't hear you.
So I think what I hear your question to be is how do we notify sellers when they're required to remit a tax? That may be is that what your question was?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you. That was one of them. Yeah.
Ms. Bears.
Madam Chair, Representative Anderson. So we do notify, we work with Streamline Sales Tax to help with remote sellers that help collect tax and remit it to the state. We also notify people through business notices, through email, through letters, through our website, whenever they're required to remit a tax that, a sales tax or whatever they, I guess whether it's a sales tax or an excise tax that's remitted to the state. So we do notify them through just general, web postings and websites and letters.
Representative Anderson.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just reading the language and trying to figure this out. So it would be revenue would somehow track whether a business was selling its goods for delivery versus for pickup somehow?
Ms. Bears.
Madam Chair, Representative, so business would be required to track whether it's being delivered and that they owe the fee or whether it's being a pickup. So the business would be required to, for instance, if someone ordered something from Amazon, Amazon would have to count that delivery as a delivered item and then add that fee. And then they would just kind of claim it on their sales tax return when they filed their sales tax return at the next month. So the responsibility would go under the business to make sure that they're reporting the fee.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Anderson.
One more follow-up on that. So the business would then track whether the basket of the box still being delivered is something that is food, so like groceries versus, something else that's taxable?
Ms. Bears.
Madam Chair, Representative, yeah, it would be considered, anything that we do when they sell, a retailer is required to put the tax on items that are taxable or exempt the items that are not taxable. And so it would be the same type of requirement.
Representative Anderson.
Okay, for the delivery fee. just one last question for revenue. Part of the bill has interest on overpayments. What's the rate of interest currently from revenue? So if a business overpaid for some reason, they would be getting a refund with interest according to this legislation?
Ms. Bears?
Madam Chair, I think it's 3% or 4%, but I'm just double checking real quick.
Good.
You should overpay.
I would.
4%?
I don't deliver it.
Oh.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. This question is for, I'm guessing, Representative Kegel. We're asking retails to be the tax collectors. Any compensation for them? Obviously, there's going to be a lot of work with point-of-sale transactions.
Representative Kegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We didn't put that in there because our job is to fund state government. And so we have money in it for revenue, but I think that's our purview.
Representative Whitty.
Okay, so I guess then the other question would be, let's say I bought something, the food's not right, and I return it. Do I get that return back on the 75 cents?
Representative Kegel.
No. Well, if it was food, and it wasn't like, if it was just coming from Cub Foods, and it was like your weekly groceries with, then you wouldn't have the delivery fee.
Representative Whitty.
It's Chipotle, and they got my order wrong, and I didn't want the food. Obviously, they didn't deliver what I asked for, so that's where I'm guessing if that would be removed off my bill.
Representative Kegel to the Chipotle question.
Madam Chair, now I'm hungry. I would say that would have to be a battle you'd fight with the business on the return. Because if it is delivered to your house, technically, yes, that's not returnable. If you cancel the order, then it's returnable. But if it makes it to your house, then, then that's going to have to be resolved with the business, I believe. Because, I mean, if they get your order wrong, you usually have to resolve that with the business as well.
Representative Whitty.
I'm sorry to make you hungry, but I would also say, doesn't that kind of contradict what you just said about clothing? If they get your order wrong, you're not getting charged for it. So it should be the same with your food or any of those other items. A grocery store might get you the wrong item. So you're getting charged for something, a service that you're expecting at a good delivery, and it ain't coming through.
Is that a statement or a question, Representative
Question.
Whitty? Okay.
Question.
Chair Kegel.
Madam Chair, so clothing is not exempt. So when I order that sweater off of Target and then it comes to me as a crop top, I get the fee. And so I return it. And that's, and I pay that fee. That's the convenience I have of getting the stuff and trying it on at home versus going into the store and trying it on.
Representative Whitty.
I'm confused, but I'm good. I will, I guess what I'm trying to figure out in all of this, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And if it's a regressive tax that we're trying to, obviously, like you said, fund government. But I'm trying to figure out how it can help our retailers without hurting, our seniors are hurting, our low-income families are hurting, and now they're going to be paying this extra tax to fund something. So I guess I was just trying to kind of drill down a little further on it. So thank you.
I'll turn it over to you guys, but I think the problem that we're trying to solve here is the condition of the state's infrastructure, which I imagine we all have concerns about in our own communities. So, Chair Kegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, this is my fourth term. So in the 6 years I've been here, I've offered 2 gas tax increase bills. And that just isn't going to be where we're going to go. And so this is a new and different way of looking at how we increase revenue into our transportation system. Because right now we hear, we've got this giant budget surplus, wonderful, wonderful. But transportation is really kind of divorced from the general fund. And so within the closed system of transportation, the revenue is decreasing. And we know that gas tax revenue is also going to be decreasing because of our acceleration of adoption of EVs. And so if we don't want worse roads, if we don't want another bridge to collapse, we're going to have to get more revenue into our system. And I see this as a unique way to not have to raise a gas tax. I see this as a fee that you can, or a tax you can kind of control as well. I can change my behaviors. I can make sure that I purchase more things in one delivery versus, going to Amazon 3 times a day and hitting the buy now button. And so really this is just like, we need to fix our roads. We can't let another bridge collapse. And so, anybody who's driven Pennsylvania or Hennepin completely knows that it's getting worse. And our roads are already in really poor shape. And so that's the problem we are trying to solve, is getting new revenue into our system so that we can make some really good investments in our transportation system. And this delivery fee goes directly into roads. It goes to roads, and then we also, going to your point about seniors, we also created a fund to funnel money into food support services like Meals on Wheels, so that we can really hopefully expand access to that as well. Because it's not fun raising taxes and fees. It's really it's a bummer. But I think what's the worst bummer is getting in a car accident because your tire blows out on the freeway due to poor conditions. And so it's just really the things that we have to weigh and the decisions we have to make. And so that's why this is before us.
Thank you, Representative Whitty. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions maybe for staff here is, does this amendment, if this becomes law, which it probably will, does it affect the streamlined sales tax at all?
Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Davids, I believe that the department concluded that there was no streamlined effects for these provisions.
Okay.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe Ms. Templin or Schill could help me out with this one. I'm sure it's in the stuff we have here, but then I'd have to actually read it. So how many FTEs does the department have to have because of this massive amount of work that taxes poor people?
I'm not sure if Mr. Lee has that or Ms. Templin.
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, that type of information is not available in the revenue analysis. However, if a fiscal note was requested, that information may be available in a fiscal note, and Mr. Lee may have that.
And thank you, Madam Chair. While he's coming down, I mean, there's going to be, I don't know how many employees you're going to have at the department, because this is going to be a logistical nightmare to track this stuff.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair and Representative Davids, Andrew Lee from House Fiscal Staff. I'm looking at the fiscal note for House File 580, and that is contained the tax provisions of the retail delivery fee. In the fiscal note, Department of Revenue estimates 1.55 FTEs in fiscal 2024 and 1.01 FTEs in fiscal 2025.
Representative Davids.
Well, that's, Madam Chair, it's quite astonishing that you take the whole state of Minnesota and you're going to have these massive regressive fees on poor people and everyone else, and you can do it with 3 people? I'm not believing that for a second. That's fiction. So now, and to your point, Madam Chair, this is for infrastructure, so we're going to try and get more money in infrastructure on the backs of the poorest of the poor. This is as regressive as you can possibly get. So we're going to fix a road by taxing the poor more. I don't understand where this committee is going on these things. Also, this would be the highest tax in the country. Somebody just said that we don't like raising taxes. I don't believe that either. It seems that my friends over there love raising taxes because you're doing it all day long here. So one question I have is, okay, so this is probably for the author of or Representative Cagle. So you got small businesses can't eat the tax. They have to disclose the tax. But you have the large retailers, you got the Targets, the Walmarts, you got Amazon that can bury the fee. And so it looks to me like the small guys are the bad guys and the big guys are the good guys. Why can one bury the fee and the other cannot?
Representative Cagle.
Madam Chair, I guess I don't understand why you think one can and one can't. The amendment says that this is an option for the businesses if they would like to absorb the cost of it, and that was actually something that we heard from folks in Colorado. They're going back and amending their bill right now because they had it as a line item that each retailer would specifically have to call out. Our amendment actually makes it so they don't have to call it out. So if a small business doesn't want to, remit it on the sales tax or on their receipt, then they can build it into the cost of their product and not pass it along on a separate delivery fee itemization. So they can absorb the cost if they would like. And then it's a choice if the business wants to either pass it on or absorb the cost.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They can basically hide the cost, but they will pass that on to the consumer. And again, being extremely regressive and really hurting the poor. This bill, I don't know how you administer this thing. You're sure not going to do it with 3 FTEs at the department. That's not going to happen. This is a state of almost 6 million people. This is a massive, massive tax increase, and the department, and I don't see how they do it. I just don't see how they do it. And Madam Chair, if I could be recognized when this amendment is put on, I'd like to ask for a roll call on the bill. I'm getting old, so I might forget. Okay. So if you could help me.
Do you want a roll call on the amendment and the bill, or just the bill?
No, just the bill.
Okay.
So
Well,
at
you've
the proper
requested a
time.
roll call, so there will be a roll call on the underlying bill.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, I've got a business in my district that's considered Schwann's Foods. And, that is a, at-call business, and they'll come, they either pre-order it, and that is just simply their business model. You literally kind of do your shopping off the truck. How will that business do this? As far as, how will this equate where it's someone literally comes out the truck and say, you know what, I'll take tater tots, I'll take some ice cream, I'll take this, I'll take that. Like, how will that work? Because delivery is it's almost like a grocery store on wheels. How will that interact with this? Some of those items being taxable and some of them not.
Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So last time I got Schwann's, the dude had a little register printed receipt thing on his belt. And so they were able to calculate the sales tax, everything right in there. And again, this is a convenience of something coming to your house, giving you prepared meals. And so I'm sure they would just have to put the fee on that as well. Representative
Swedzinski.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And then just a second question. So will this, if you're an elderly person ordering medical supplies, like if you're at home, you're stuck at home, if you order a wheelchair or a walker or a CPAP machine and replacements, will those be, will that be on this as well?
Representative Cagle.
Madam Chair, no, because they're sales tax exempt.
Medical devices are exempt from sales tax. So it's the sales tax that kicks the delivery fee into gear, right? Representative Swedzinski.
Sounds good. Thank you, Madam Chair. So this will tax hot meals. Okay. This is a hot mess. Thank you.
All right, seeing no further discussion. Oh, sorry. We're good? Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I'm going to renew my motion that the committee adopts the A31 amendment. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The motion prevails. The amendment, the A31 is adopted.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to the underlying bill. Representative Hornstein, please explain your bill.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I know that it's fair game to talk about the entire bill, but I think here we're going to focus on Article 3, which are the taxes and fees, including the delivery fee as amended. You can find that on pages 44 through 60. But before we get into that, I do want to, Representative Whitty had asked, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And I think we should start there. And, I'm wearing a button that one of our trades passed along, LIUNA, and it lists a report card. So civil engineers gave us a report card on our infrastructure a couple of years ago. So here are Minnesota's grades for roads. Roads, a D+. Bridges, a C. Transit, a C-. Now, if I brought a report card like this home in elementary school and, maybe I was, my mom might have come and watched me, seen me watching some cartoons, she'd probably say, you shouldn't be watching cartoons, maybe you should be reading Time magazine or something like that. These are bad grades, and we need to do something about it. We need to do something about it urgently. Members, the roads we're driving on may be a result of the freeze-thaw cycle after a particularly harsh winter. But at the beginning of the session, MnDOT came to our committee and said, by the year 2030, 7 short years from now, 10% of the roads in Minnesota will be rated in poor condition. That's some of the roads that we're driving on now, full of potholes. Potholes that cause flat tires, potholes that require our constituents to get front-end alignments, hundreds of dollars. That's regressive. Talk about our bridges. We have been going year after year after year, limping along, underfunding our infrastructure. The one time we had a slight increase in revenue in 2008, we did improve a few bridges, but we still have many hundreds and hundreds of fracture-critical bridges. We rate those a C. Dangerous bridges that are in need of repair that are literally crumbling. A dangerous bridge, that's regressive. Transit, a C-. We have people waiting for buses in the cold that never show up. We have frontline workers. That's regressive. We have frontline workers that have to take a couple buses and a train at 4 in the morning to get to the airport or to get to a healthcare facility. That's regressive. And we're going to have some testimony later that shows that it is not the poorest of the poor that are shouldering the burden for these new fees, but it's really, Mr. Bernstein will show you the data that this is actually falling on higher income earners, the lion's share. So, members, this bill is making a generational investment in our infrastructure. The federal government has stepped up in a big way. Not since Eisenhower and the New Deal has the federal government made this type of commitment to our infrastructure. Our infrastructure that is the engine of job creation, economic opportunity, and mobility for everybody. It's the pathway to a better life. Our climate crisis is also impacted. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions, and our transit system is absolutely in need of upgrading. Transit, we know, is the #1 way we lift people out of poverty and into a better life. This is what we're paying for. We're making that generational investment that we haven't made in decades, literally decades, in Minnesota. And I'll just say in conclusion, Madam Chair, we have been bequeathed one of the best transportation systems in the country at least 70 years ago when this system was built out. It is literally crumbling before our eyes. And so for those Minnesotans forward-looking Minnesotans who built this infrastructure, that built this transportation system. We owe it to them. We owe it to generations ahead of us to make this investment now, again, where the federal government has been leading. And much of our investments in this bill help to match the federal commitment. It's up to us now in the state. That is what we are buying with this bill, a generational investment in job-creating, commerce-promoting, environmentally beneficial transportation systems. And so, members, let me just very quickly go through some of the highlights of Article 3. This bill is similar to other bills I've brought to the Tax Committee in previous biennia. So the building blocks of the dedicated revenue that we have in this bill, previously, as Chair Cagle mentioned, we did have a gas tax. In 2019, it was a 20-cent per gallon gas tax, which passed through this committee and passed off the House floor. In 2021, we indexed the gas tax. That passed through this committee and passed the House floor. As Chair Cagle said, for roads and bridges, we looked around the country at innovative ways to address the dire need for additional road and bridge funding. We looked at the state of Colorado and a few other examples, and the delivery fee really fit the bill because unlike the gas tax, it is a growing source of revenue long term. The gas tax is a declining source of revenue. So that is the workhorse in this bill to fund roads and bridges. We also have a registration fee increase. That has been a part of previous bills before this committee, not the registration fee not the delivery fee as we've noted. We have lots of questions because this is a new feature of the bill that we haven't had. We don't have the gas tax, we have the delivery fee. We've had the registration fee in the past, and you see that again in this legislation. We have also had a metro sales tax in the past. That was a half-cent metro sales tax. It is now 3/4 of a cent. 1/8 of that goes to roads. That is something we have not had. We had that in 2019. We didn't have it in 2021. It's back. We feel that the metro area needs particular attention through this sales tax. So it's not just transit, it's roads. And then finally, members, what we get with this metro sales tax are some new and innovative ways of doing transit. We have the beginnings of, I believe, one of the best arterial bus rapid transit systems in the country. We've built 5 lines. We envision building many more. These are buses that run on our arterial streets. Even at the height of the pandemic, ridership was solid on these arterial buses. We also need to fund our local bus system. We identify the many uses of the sales tax. We didn't do that in the past. We felt it was really important for the legislature and the public at large to see very specifically what we fund and what the legislative intention is. So it's the building blocks of our transit system, not just in the metro, but statewide. But in the metro, we fund it through the sales tax. So microtransit, another piece of this. Again, the arterial bus rapid transit and microtransit, which we envision funding through this metro sales tax, have had some bipartisan support and agreement on. And that's an important feat because transit hasn't necessarily been as bipartisan as it has been in the past. We also raised the sales tax statewide on new automobiles. The general sales tax is 6.875%. For automobiles, it's 6.5%, so we raise it up to the to equalize that with the other items that you would buy through the sales tax. And that is a statewide effort, and that is the motor vehicle sales tax, which funds both roads and transit. That is one of the ways we fund and increase funding for greater Minnesota transit. So members, those are the main features in Article 3, our main revenue raisers. Again, similar to what we've done in the past, except for what you've examined here in terms of the delivery fee. We think it's a good alternative and a good option to what we've raised before with the motor fuels fee. And that is an important revenue raiser. We're able to bond off of that and fund our roads and bridges statewide. And it's a very important part of our new effort. I'll conclude with this, Madam Chair. Something that's very new and important in this bill is funding small cities. We don't have an ongoing revenue source for cities population 5,000 and under. These are both in the metro, but the vast majority are outside of the metro. They now have a stable, reliable funding source, just like counties and cities and townships and the state have. Very, very important breakthrough in this bill that we fund. And through the A31 amendment, we made sure that they were funded in the first year of this legislation. So that's the overall need. That's Article 3, which is of interest to this committee. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know we have a lot of testifiers as well.
Thank you so much, Chair Hornstein. So yeah, we'll move to testifiers before we get to member discussion. We have a bunch of testifiers signed up. I would just remind everybody to please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less and focus on those revenue provisions in Article 3. First up, Chris Fredson, and then Beth Kadoun is on deck.
Thank you, Chair Gomez, Lee Davids, and members of the committee. My name is Chris Fredson. I'm Director of Public Affairs for LiUNA, Minnesota, North Dakota. We are Minnesota's infrastructure union, proud to represent more than 13,000 skilled construction laborers who build our roads, bridges, and transit in every corner of the state. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the provisions of House File 2887 that will create new, long-term, and dedicated revenue for transportation infrastructure, specifically the 100% dedication of the sales tax on auto parts and repairs, the Amazon delivery fee, license tab and registration fee and motor vehicle sales tax increases, and the Metro-wide sales tax largely for transit. As you know, there is no budget surplus for transportation funding. 92% of road and bridge funding in Minnesota comes from constitutionally dedicated funding sources like the gas tax, and it's already been testified that beginning in 2025, the gas tax is going to generate less revenue for our roads and bridges. 5% of road and bridge funding in Minnesota comes from the statutorily dedicated sales tax on auto parts and repairs, and that tax was capped at, those revenues dedicated to transportation were capped at $145.6 million in 2020, and so even this revenue source is losing value. We need long-term and dedicated revenue to make our roads and bridges safer. Minnesota has more than 600 structurally deficient bridges, thousands of miles of roads in poor condition. As Chair Hornstein said, our roads are graded a D+, bridges a C, and transit a C-. We're asking all of you to do your duty to address this growing threat to the safety, health, and prosperity of all Minnesotans. This legislation will make our members safer, help create family-supporting construction careers, and help us build a safer, cleaner, and more fair multimodal transportation system that will help connect all Minnesotans to opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fredson. Ms. Kadoun, you're up. If anybody has a question, we'll beckon you back up, okay? And then on deck is Eric Bernstein. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Beth Kadoun. I represent the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. We certainly agree that transportation infrastructure is an important part of our business climate in order to facilitate movement of goods and people that will help in our state's private sector economic growth. We do thank Chair Hornstein for including full dedication of the sales tax collection on auto parts. This was started in 2017, and now this will ensure that all these funds are used for transportation purposes. That is very important. This will provide a needed boost in funding, help ensure we have one more funding mechanism in the mix that will grow over time to help us keep pace with the ever-increasing costs of construction and maintenance. Unlike most other transportation stakeholders, the day-to-day concerns of our rank-and-file employer members requires that we advocate for policies and solutions that balance the need for increased investment along with the state's competitiveness as it relates to the tax and business climate. Although there are many positive provisions in this bill, we are very concerned that this bill is unbalanced with regards to the many tax increases and fees that are included. Over just the next few years alone, this would increase taxes and fees by more than $3.7 billion, including the tab fee increases you heard about, the new retail delivery fee that others from the retailers and grocers will be talking more about. It also adds $2 billion more in metro area sales tax increase. And when you add in the housing omnibus bill that was heard earlier, that will be a 1% increase in the sales tax rate that would amount to over $2.8 billion over the next 4 years. I would mention, it was mentioned some of the business inputs for sales tax. Businesses do pay over about 49% of the sales tax. So there would certainly be a lot of those taxable sales and deliveries to businesses that would have that delivery tax as well. Realize that these increases are coming at a time when Minnesota already imposes a much higher tax burden than many other states. And additionally, we're also seeing other tax increases that are being proposed that are moving through the legislature. Again, that new $2.9 billion payroll tax in the next biennium that would start for the paid leave mandate, and other tax increases that may still be forthcoming from this tax committee. We're certainly committed to continue working with legislators to secure additional investment in transportation. We'd like to find a way that would be balanced with the already challenging tax and regulatory climate for our Minnesota employers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Eric Bernstein. Up next is Owen Young.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee, my name is Eric Bernstein, and I am director of We Make Minnesota, which is a coalition of labor and community groups united in support of our state's collective investments for a brighter future. Thank you for having me here today to share our support for the revenue raisers in HF 2887. Our members use public roads and transit to get to work, where they educate our students, care for the sick, and maintain our shared infrastructure. We think it's important that these systems have the sustained funding that they need. Dedicated revenues have grown more slowly, or in some cases shrunk, especially in comparison to the general fund. So these revenue raisers are especially important. I want in particular to focus my remarks on the proposed 3/4 cent metro sales tax and the objection that this is a regressive tax. Regressive means that it costs lower income Minnesotans a larger share of their income than it does higher income Minnesotans. Regressivity is a useful concept to consider, but it also represents an incomplete analysis of the impact that taxes have on Minnesotans. According to the Department of Revenue, their most recent tax incidence study, the highest earning 20% of Minnesotans pay 45% of all state sales taxes, while the lowest earning 20% pay just 8%. In dollar terms, the average household in the top 10% paid about $6,000 in 2018 in annual sales taxes, while those in the bottom 10% paid just about $700. I think to most people that would sound like a generally progressive distribution. The catch is that while higher earning groups, in this case, pay 8 times more in sales taxes, they earn 30 times more in income. By this standard, only a tax levied specifically on income, or one very narrowly focused maybe on wealth, would count as progressive. In fact, 13 of 15 state revenue sources are considered regressive by the Department of Revenue's, by the technical definition of progressivity. That's not because, again, they don't charge higher earners more than lower earners, but because few things are distributed as unevenly as income. In this way, as inequality increases, more taxes will measure as regressive. So knowing that we do need to fund government, there's not a world where we rule out regressive taxes. And in our opinion, we shouldn't. Broad taxes ensure that everyone pays into collective public goods, and I think that's a good thing. Social Security and Medicare are 2 examples of public programs where everyone pays in and everyone benefits, and they're extraordinarily popular. Most importantly, this entire distributional analysis ignores the positive redistributional effects of spending the taxes that we raise. The things that we fund, they lay a foundation for participation in society. Chair Hornstein talked about, the importance of transportation for getting to work, for getting around, and obviously there's public education and many, many other public things that we all contribute to and benefit from. There are also some parts of the tax code that redistribute revenue or income more directly through credits and refunds, and things like, broad taxes like sales taxes enable us to fund those as well. So I know we'll have different perspectives on the value of the public expenditures, but in our opinion, that's a different question than whether or not a regressive source of revenue is appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Up next is Owen Young, and on deck is Darwin Schaeferlane. Welcome to the committee. Please just say your name as you're getting your testimony started.
Thank you, Chair, and members for letting me testify today. My name is Owen Young. I live in St. Louis Park, and I'm a transit rider, and I'm here to speak in support of the metro area sales tax proposed in House File 2887. It's time to make public transit a permanent priority in the Twin Cities Metro, and that is exactly what this will do. As many others have noted, our transit system is not properly funded, despite how many people rely on it to get around every day. This money is necessary to improve service and expand our transit network because improved bus and light rail service benefits the whole region. It provides access to good jobs, healthcare, housing, and community that might not be accessible to those without a car. Simply providing transit access is one small step towards addressing income and health inequality in this state. On top of that, we are in the midst of a climate crisis. Transportation is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases in Minnesota. Having a mass transit system that takes cars off the road and reduces congestion is critical to reducing the amount of carbon we emit into the atmosphere. More and more people will be moving to the Twin Cities Metro in the coming decades, and we can't just keep building more lanes to accommodate demand. A better transit network benefits everyone, so let's fund it properly for today and the future. This is a sales tax, which is always a touchy subject, but this tax provides a regional solution to a regional problem, underfunded transit. We need more than a one-time investment from the budget surplus. Our transit system can and should be so much better than it is today. Finally, I would like to address my concerns with the 1/6 of this revenue going to the Transportation Advisory Board for the purpose of highway projects. In my view, this money is better spent on improvements for public transit, walking, and biking along roadways. Thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you for your testimony. Darwin Schaeferlane, and on deck is Margaret Donahoe.
Good morning, members of the committee and chair. It is nice to be back up here again. My name is Darwin Schaeferlane, and I am a Bloomington resident. This bill is transformative on a number of levels, and my friends and I have fought hard to make many inclusions on this omnibus bill, including testifying on the House. Screw that. I, like many others here, do not use a car and ride public transportation to get where I need to go. On the way to the Capitol this morning, I saw empty roads in rush hour with few cars in sight. On the Orange Line bus alone, I saw dozens of more people than were driving, and on the Green Line train, even more people than driving on University Ave, proving the need for more public transit in Minnesota. Increasing the sales tax, including this delivery tax, and funding the BRT and bus network upgrades, this omnibus bill will improve our bus system in desperate need of service improvements to be more accessible and attractive to riders. Having to climb over snow just to push a pedestrian crossing button should not be the norm, but it is right now. Having to climb over snowbanks to get to the bus shouldn't be normal, but it is right now. We need these taxes to fund our transit system, our roads and sidewalks, and multimodal and bike infrastructure. That being said, with all of those barriers, you still see people walking, biking, and taking public transit because we have to. This is why the 75-cent delivery tax is even more needed. As somebody who is disabled, with a mother who has stage 4 breast cancer, we are often dependent upon delivery services. That being said, if we could safely walk, bike, and access stores and restaurants we order from, we would rather do that instead. Up to 50% of car trips are taken in a distance of 3 miles or less, and up to 28% of those trips are literally 1 mile or less. It's hardly the same for delivery driving. As someone who was a former Uber Eats delivery cyclist, my request is that this bill, if anything, consider a tax exemption for deliveries made by foot, bike, and other options that aren't personal vehicles and cars. That is what we need instead of virtue signaling about how the tax will impact poor and disabled people. I want to ask the members of the committee here to also consider a vehicle tax by weight. As vehicles transition from gas to electric, the weight is not changing on our roads and is increasing from heavy batteries and larger vehicles. To supplant declining gas tax revenue, we should look at options to replace that revenue, and a vehicle weight tax is an appropriate measure to ensure the people most responsible for destroying our roads pay for the damage they do, electric or internal combustion cars alike. To address any potential further concerns on this matter, let's be clear. What's regressive is that we pay taxes for infrastructure we can't use. We pay taxes to subsidize car dependency, and we are left with a broken and underfunded system for people who don't use cars. The Twin Cities has the 6th worst vehicle miles traveled in the entire country. We cannot sustain that. We pay taxes for highways and roads that do not pay for themselves and consistently need maintenance after every winter. We are willing to pay taxes if it means getting more options than this, because people are leaving this country to places that do provide that infrastructure option. Freedom of movement is a human right. We should not be prisoners to a lack of ADA compliant and accessible infrastructure because we don't have cars. Car dependency is literally bankrupting Minnesota and the United States. So if we don't fund our transportation system, we will literally go broke fixing what already exists, let alone what we need to build more of. And Minnesota taxes are high, but that pays for high quality education in a high quality state. And where we don't have tax funding, the issues show greatly. Thank you, members of the committee, for hearing my testimony, and I hope these considerations are heard. Let's put forward the country's best public transportation and transportation plan overall.
Thank you for your testimony. Margaret Donahoe, and on deck is Jamie Poole.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Margaret Donahoe. I'm the director of the Minnesota Transportation Alliance. The Transportation Alliance includes local governments, the transportation industry, transit systems, labor, and other advocates. On behalf of the member organizations of the Transportation Alliance, I would like to thank Chair Hornstein for working to improve the safety and effectiveness of Minnesota's transportation system, which is integral to the state's economy. The state of Minnesota has increased the gas tax and license tab fees once in the last 30 years. These user fees, along with the motor vehicle sales tax, are constitutionally dedicated because Minnesota voters recognized that ongoing dedicated revenue is critical for maintenance of the transportation system and decided that these fees should be invested in transportation. But the lack of action to allow these revenue sources to keep up with demand is clear. House File 2887 meets the challenges we face with a combination of one-time general fund dollars, some ongoing general fund revenue, and some increases in revenue. That is exactly the funding package needed for the state to catch up and keep up our critical infrastructure. We know that all revenue sources come under attack. There's little support for raising the gas tax, so we've been told to be creative and find other ways to pay for transportation. The delivery fee is a new idea, but it makes sense given the huge growth in delivery vehicles on our roadways. According to projections, there will likely be over 30% more delivery vehicles on roads, delivering 78% more packages by 2030. In addition to increasing traffic congestion and wear and tear on highways, this will increase motor vehicle emissions. The delivery fee encourages fewer trips while providing badly needed revenue for roadways. Everyone in Minnesota relies on the transportation system every day for services and products and to live their lives. The system has to be paid for one way or another. Without state revenue, the burden falls on the property tax. We urge you to support House File 2887, including the increases in dedicated ongoing funding that are critically needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jamie Poole. Up next is Katie Nicholson.
Chair Gomez, members of the committee, my name is Jamie Poole, President of the Minnesota Grocers Association, and I'm here to respectfully oppose the 75-cent delivery fee being introduced in House File 2887. Our members consist of 100 of grocers and convenience stores, many of whom are independent, multi-generational, and locally owned. We have over 300 members with 1,300 locations statewide. Access to food is critically important, and during the pandemic, delivery became the only option for many Minnesotans. As a direct result, grocery delivery has remained popular. In a recent survey, 1 in 6 consumers say they purchase groceries online and have them delivered to their homes weekly. This service is extremely convenient and in some cases necessary, particularly for elderly and homebound customers. The 75-cent fee on nearly every retail state, we believe, is a challenge. The bill language implies that non-taxable food items would be exempt, but if a transaction includes a single taxable item, the fee would be applied. Many common and essential items in your local grocery store are taxable. For example, a beverage that contains more than 50% of fruit juice would be non-taxable, but yet if that beverage contains 49%, it is taxable. Additionally, the language requires that the fee is a not taxable part of the sale, as defining it by a retail sale. But statute states that delivery fees are taxable. So this, we are fearful, will create great confusion, because statute does say delivery fees are taxable. We believe an educational component is absolutely mandatory, so Minnesotans understand that this is a government-mandated fee, not an arbitrary retail fee. There is a strong national movement to ensure that SNAP recipients have fair and equitable access to food delivery. In 2022, 435,000 Minnesotans were on SNAP benefits. It is a valid concern that this new fee will become a barrier for recipients and again add tax complexities. This proposal requires significant investment to update point-of-sale systems to track and collect the pass-through fee. Retailers will pay credit card interchange fees on this new pass-through fee as well. There's no provision for upfront or ongoing cost. The E911 TAM pass-through fee is similar, and retailers retain 3% of the combined fee for administration. This deserves consideration. We thank you for the opportunity. We thank you for your work, but there is significant work to be done to move this provision from concept to function. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Katie Nicholson, and on deck is Bruce Newstead.
All right, am I good to start?
Yeah, please just identify yourself for the record as you get started with your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Katie Nicholson. Really quick, I would like to thank you, Chair Hornstein, for mentioning our expansive arterial plus rapid transit network. I ride the A line and was there for the first day of the D line, and it has been a great way to quickly build bus shelters and, off-board fare payment, nice buses, all that. So thank you very much for mentioning that. So on the bill, our road infrastructure is aging, and HF 2887 is here to address it. I went on a long bike ride a couple days ago between Highland Park, Como, downtown, Northeast, and near North. The name of the neighborhood changed, but what didn't was the consistently poor quality streets ridden with potholes. You know what else didn't change? The great quality of the dedicated bicycle infrastructure. And I'm not talking the on-street painted bike lanes. Those tend to worsen with the quality of the street. I'm talking about the dedicated paths, the type of infrastructure that people feel comfortable riding on and would ride it on if we made it more accessible to do so for most people. But because a lot of our infrastructure is lacking, only those dedicated or those who are going to use, or those who have to are going to use these non-protected pathways, the same ones ripe with potholes. The bicycle paths, however, were not ripe with them. And I have to assume it's because there's such a small addition to any street and it doesn't need nearly as much maintenance. What I think we need to do is not only implement sales tax exclusively for our transit and bicycle networks, but we do need to implement the 75-cent fee on delivery and ride share, since these do happen to be using the roads we need to repair, as well as taxing vehicle weight, since the heaviest vehicles are doing the most wear and tear on our roads. Because whether transit users and bike riders realize it or not, by choosing or having to not drive, we're playing a small yet essential part in the reduction of the wear and tear on these roads, which is essentially creating another subsidy for drivers. That's not to say, of course, that these streets and roads aren't important, but when you fund transit and bikes, these roads become better for drivers as well, since we will now be able to direct more funding to these roads, combined with them not needing as intensive of maintenance. I hope that you'll consider implementing these taxes, as in the long run, these will benefit everyone, especially those less fortunate. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Bruce Newstead, and then on deck is Shane Zart, excuse me.
Madam Chair, my name is Bruce Newstead with the Minnesota Retailers Association. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I appreciate it. I'm testifying today against the delivery fee. Probably no big surprise there, Madam Chair. We do think, as you've heard, it has some significant impacts on customers and the operations of retailers, especially small retailers. I think one of the polite criticisms I oftentimes will hear from Chair Hornstein and Chair Cagle is that I'm not offering a better idea, and I'll be upfront about that today. I am not offering up an alternative idea. But I am fairly convinced that this is not the right idea, not the right approach based on its impact on customers and businesses. I wanted to say this idea is generally very unpopular. As you go on your spring break, Easter Passover break this week, as you talk to constituents, I think you're going to find a consumer delivery fee to be a fairly unpopular item among constituents and also unpopular among your business owners. And also, as you've heard, it is what I would call untested. And by untested, I mean, well, Colorado has implemented the fee. It has not gone well. They're going through some iterations of trying to fix that, and this is simply an idea that just hasn't been fleshed out enough yet to be viable in Minnesota's marketplace. I want to go back to one of the questions earlier about who is the customer, and thank you, Chair Cagle, for mentioning wholesalers and business-to-business taxes. It just points out some of the complexity that exists in this bill, and that is, I don't know if any of you are consultants, and let's say you order lunch for your consulting business. In addition to the systems things that we've heard about and whether it should be taxed or not taxed, one of the things we have to think about is a retailer at that point is really going to have to ask, oh, is this purchase for your business or is it for you? Because quite frankly, those lines are a little blurred in our tax code relative to how somebody is set up under our tax code. So I just want to mention that as another point that is very difficult. It's just not, the idea is not as simple as just charging a consumer a 75-cent fee. Just a few other things, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. Ms. Poole mentioned it, but the impact on small business will be great on this. There will be the 75-cent fee that the retailer has to collect, but the retailer at the end of the day will not have 75 cents left to remit to the state. The retailer will have less swipe card fees and less administration fees, all those other infrastructure pieces that will greatly impact the retailer. So the retailer may end up having 50 cents of the 75 at the end of the day, thus actually costing the retailer. I think I heard the bell, but I do want to just point out Chair Davids makes a really great point. I love to talk about a streamlined sales tax initiative. I'm really unclear how this fee, which actually functions as a tax, will impact Streamline, and I think that's a great conversation point for the committee. So, Madam Chair, again, just because I don't have an alternative idea today, I'd like to submit that this is not a great idea moving forward. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your testimony. Up next is Shane Zart. On deck is Peter Wagenius, if he's here. I'm not sure if I see him. Welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you, Chair and members. My name is Shane Zart with the firm Flaherty & Hood, and representing the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, which is a coalition of more than 110 cities, all located outside of the 7-county metro area. And as you might imagine, I want to thank Chair Hornstein for some of the provisions in the bill that invest in city street funding. And you heard from other testifiers, but it is the case that when state support for local transportation system lags behind, that impact falls on our property taxpayers. And that includes our larger cities, where as much as this committee knows well, the state's general fund budget has been in good shape this biennium. Our transportation sources have been lagging. And this bill and the comprehensive ongoing dedicated funding in Article 3 helps rectify that. Now, Chair Hornstein also mentioned there's a category of our cities that don't receive any consistent dedicated support from the state, and that's our small cities, those under 5,000. I do want to mention, you mentioned, Chair Hornstein, a couple of things that have passed out of this committee and off the floor before, but haven't made it all the way across. Ongoing dedicated funding for small cities is one of those things. This bill would set us up again to finally make that investment ongoing dedicated for those cities. So we will be watching this closely. It's a top priority of the CGMC to make sure that those cities receive ongoing funding this session. So I want to conclude as well by just thanking you for other investments in the bill, those in Greater Minnesota Transit, the Corridors of Commerce program that are made possible by some of the revenues being allocated by this bill, and happy to stand for any questions. Otherwise, thank you to the committee.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Peter Wagenius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Peter Wagenius, Legislative Director of Sierra Club North Star Chapter. Thank you, Representative Hornstein, Chair Gomez, and members. Because of continued leadership by the House on transportation, we are on the verge of a long-delayed victory. Those unfamiliar with transportation finance may be tempted to argue there's no need for ongoing revenue in the context of a surplus of one-time general fund dollars. But as you all know well, transportation is funded separately through dedicated streams. When it comes to transportation, there is no surplus. We also know that transit specifically is not a system you build and then look at. It's a system you must build and operate. That means operate by paying drivers, which is the largest operating cost. Paying drivers, it's not even legal to do that. That must, as an ongoing cost, must be funded with ongoing dollars. It's not even legal to pay drivers with bonds. When people suggest sometimes we should continue to just hobble along, cobbling together one-time dollars bit by bit, that's the problem. That's what we've been doing for decades when it comes to bus service. It's why bus neglect, which we've discussed on Transit Equity Day, is such a problem. The impacts of state inaction on ongoing funding are real. We've been underinvesting on transit compared to peer regions, putting us at a competitive disadvantage. We've been underinvesting compared to the need to address the climate crisis, as increases in vehicle miles traveled, VMT, in the metro area have far outstripped increases in population. We've been underinvesting compared to the need for equitable access to jobs and opportunity, especially for many Minnesotans who are too young, too old, physically challenged, or economically distressed, for whom driving a car is not an option. The most regressive outcome possible is the status quo. Even if everyone could drive, effectively requiring everyone to pay $9,000 to $10,000 a year to own and operate a car shuts out a lot of people from economic opportunity. Finally, it is appropriate to focus the sales tax in the metro area. When it comes to climate polluting, public health damaging increases in VMT, the metro area is the problem. But good news, the metro area is also the solution. If the legislature is willing to fund bus rapid transit, we can rapidly build out that BRT network across the metro area and secure its many benefits for climate, equity, and public health. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. So that's the end of ours, those who signed up. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on House File 2887? Yeah, please come on up and just, if you could introduce yourself as you're getting started with your testimony. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Matthews Hollinshead, and I sit on the Transportation Advisory Board of the Metropolitan Council as a transit modal representative. I want to express my thanks to Chair Hornstein, the author of this bill, for something which some of us have been waiting for 30 years. We've had dedicated funding for roads, highways, and motor vehicles for 100 years. We've had very little, if any, dedicated funding for transit, for cycling, for walking, for active mobility in the 30 years since the private bus company was acquired by the public in, I think it was 1973. I do have a couple suggestions, and specifically in the uses of the sales tax, 1/6 set aside for active transportation, which I applaud, and also we've been waiting for a long time. However, the language, I believe, as currently written, refers to highway projects for the use of that 1/6. I hope those two words can be taken out, because on the tab, on the Transportation Advisory Board, the applications we get from all over the metro, from local public works departments and others, for federal matching funds, often use the words safety and crash reduction, which are also in that language, and when they're actually proposing motor vehicle capacity expansion. So in the short term, it is true. If you add a turn lane or you add another lane to a congestion part of the road, you might get a safer road for a few years. Eventually, induced demand fills it up again, and the crash rate and the safety are where they were to begin with. So I would recommend removing the words highway projects from the language which refers to the 1/6 of the 3/4 cent sales tax used for active transportation. Then right next to that in language in the bill is something which allows the full Met Council to allocate the 3/4 cent sales tax as it wishes. Now, I believe that's governed up above by subdivision which refers to transit, but I'm not 100% sure. If it's not governed by that subdivision up above, then I'm worried that the full Metropolitan Council could redirect the 3/4 cent dedicated sales tax, so it's not so dedicated. So it might go to a highway or a road or some other purpose. So those are just two fine-grained suggestions that I would make. But overall, I applaud this bill and strongly support it. And I know that my colleagues on the Transportation Advisory Board that represent the modes of cycling and walking, and there's another transit modal representative as well. I know they strongly agree with what I say here today. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. And again, thank you, Chair Hornstein, for this groundbreaking bill, I guess I'd say. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hollingshead. Is there anyone else who wishes to testify on House File 2887? Not seeing any, we'll move to member discussion. First up, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Chair Hornstein, I think you know where this conversation is going to go due to the fact that we've had this already in the Transportation Committee. My biggest issue with this entire tax package on transportation is the idea of hidden fees. This is absolutely a hidden fee to Minnesota taxpayers. You know, I am of the opinion that if you're going to pick a Minnesotan's pocket, you should at least let them see your face before you do it. This right here is hiding that taking of the tax from the Minnesota taxpayer. And I'll just give you a couple examples here. We're talking about raising the motor vehicle sales tax. We're talking about raising registration fees on Minnesotan vehicles. And you go on to any, vehicle sales website, or you listen on the television for some, the commercial, and every time there's that asterisk that's really quickly spoken at the very end of the commercial, it says, this does not include tax, title, and licensing fees. That's exactly what it says, and it's a little bit faster than that. You go on the website, you scroll all the way down to a vehicle that you're interested in purchasing, and it has 7 bullet points here. It talks about tax, title, and license fees are extra, not available with special financing, lease, and some other offers. Estimated tax includes state, county, and city taxes based on the location of the delivery. Taxes due at delivery may vary due to the purchaser's residence. Document fees are to the dealer. If displayed amounts reflect an estimate of registration fees due at a delivery. Essentially what they're saying is they in fact don't know how much you're going to have to pay for this vehicle until you actually have to go and write that check out. This is the best way of hiding tax dollars that you could ever get to. Now, when we're talking about the vehicle sales tax in particular, right now Minnesota's ranked 8th in the amount of how high our state sales tax is regarding motor vehicles. I almost think we're on a game show playing how high can we go? Because if we implement this 6.85%, we will not become the 8th highest, we'll become the 5th highest. To give you an idea, every state that surrounds us is significantly lower. Iowa, North Dakota, and Wisconsin have a 5% motor vehicle sales tax, and South Dakota has a 4% vehicle sales tax. So just for some quick and easy math, if you're going to look at $40,000 vehicle, if you buy that vehicle in South Dakota, you will save yourself $1,150 in state sales tax. You can then give that money to South Dakota and you can bring it over here, but then you're going to have a registration fee, which is going to be substantial as well. Let's talk about an electric vehicle, which averages about $60,000. If you buy that vehicle in South Dakota, you're going to be paying about $2,400 in sales tax to the state of South Dakota. But if you buy it here in the state of Minnesota with this increased motor vehicle sales tax rate, you're going to spend an extra $4,125 to the state of Minnesota so you can have your electric vehicle. That, in fact, is an increase of $1,725. Now, the best part about this, members, is that when people buy a new vehicle, they generally purchase them using financing options. So they're paying interest on top of this. So an extra $1,725 tax title to the state of Minnesota, you finance that, and the average financing on a car loan right now is 6%. So by the time you're done with this vehicle is going to cost you an arm and a leg. You are much better off if you go to a different state in our union in order to purchase that vehicle. Now, if you were to go to Alaska, you could pay 0%, but that's kind of a long drive to get that delivered. But then you'd probably have to pay the delivery fee of 75 cents. So we probably won't recommend that to anyone. When we're talking about the registration fees, now, the governor proposed a registration fee increase that I thought was kind of a sham show and a little bit of a con, but it only would have increased the taxes on Minnesota registration fees by 25% over the life cycle of that vehicle. Now, we have a little bit more of a transparent way of assessing the taxes in the way that this registration fee is being assessed, but this one, in fact, will raise the tax rate of about 30% on your registration fees over the life cycle of your vehicle, about 11 years. So we're talking about some substantial expenses due to the taxpayers in the state of Minnesota. And I think that this is one of the most tragic things that you can do, due to the fact that, like I had previously said, you walk in and you buy a new vehicle and you have absolutely no idea how much you're going to be paying in your tax, title, and licensing fee. It's almost a surprise at the end of the day. What is it going to be? I don't know. But at least when you're purchasing your fuel, there is a sticker on every single gas pump in the state of Minnesota, and that says this: the price for each gallon of gasoline includes the current state gasoline tax of 28.5 cents per gallon and federal gasoline tax of 18.4 cents per gallon. Revenue from the state fuel tax may be used only for roads and bridges, according to the Minnesota Constitution. Members, I don't know how better to tell people how much you're taking from them in the form of taxes than a sticker on a gas pump. Now, some people would argue, well, you know how much you're getting in your registration fee because every year they send you your tab fee renewal and it says right there. Well, yeah. The second year that you register it, you receive that in the mail. But when you purchase that vehicle, you do not actually receive that in the mail. I know this for a fact because I just recently purchased a vehicle, and I'm glad that I did so because now I'm seeing that you're going to raise the rates on new vehicles, so I'm really glad that I got in just in time to make sure that I, in fact, saved myself considerably with the state of Minnesota grabbing off all the money that they could possibly find from you. Members, this is, in the Transportation Committee, I called this a shameful tax. It's a hidden fee. We are not appropriately telling Minnesotans what we're taking from them, and in doing so, you're basically robbing them of this hard-earned money. I kind of look at it, and if we have 6 nickels in our pocket at the end of the day, that might be a good day. With these new increases, we won't even have 6 nickels. And you go to the delivery services on top of things. How many times? It's really interesting. At the very beginning of this session, I jokingly made a comment to a colleague from the other side of the aisle. I said, hey, is there anything that you, in fact, don't tax? And the response back was, well, if you think about it, let us know and we'll tax it. And I think Chair Cagle just found that thing with the delivery tax. That was what was not previously taxed, and now, in fact, we're going to tax it. But when you're looking at delivery services in general, a company or an individual who's performing these deliveries, not only are they paying sales tax on the vehicle that they purchased, not only are they paying to register that vehicle in the state of Minnesota, not only are they paying for the gas tax to get that vehicle where it needs to go to deliver that good, not only is the corporation paying corporate taxes, and the individual who's being paid to deliver these things is paying income taxes, but now we're going to layer another one on top of it and say we got a delivery fee on top of that. It's actually quite interesting how creative this bill is in taking as much money as it possibly can from the Minnesota taxpayers. So I guess my one question to the chair of the Transportation Committee would be, how high, in fact, can we go?
Sounds like a rhetorical question. Chair Hornstein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There were just a couple of items I wanted to quickly comment on in terms of the points that Representative Olson made. So, when you talk about these different fees that the dealers don't properly advertise and acknowledge, and I completely agree with you. We joked yesterday on the House floor about that announcer that talks about registration. I can't even do it very fast. But, how at the end of those car commercials, we should do a bill together to have much more transparency in automobile purchasing. But I think it's really important to mention that the depreciation schedule here, most people are driving older vehicles. And so you look at the depreciation schedule, it is actually quite progressive after the 5th year. And so if you're driving an older vehicle, the rate of your registration fee is lower. And so, again, yes, people buying a new car will pay an increased rate. But keep in mind, Representative Olson called it a shameful tax. I will just come back to what is shameful is the condition of our roads. What is shameful is the condition of our infrastructure. What is shameful is the fact that our transit systems are sorely in need of upgrading and have been underfunded for years and years and years. So what is shameful is the fact that our roads get a D+ grade. What is shameful is our bridges get a C. What is shameful is our transit systems get a C-. This is dedicated, constitutionally dedicated revenue. We're making an adjustment to make sure that our roads and bridges and transit systems are adequately funded.
Thank you, Chair Hornstein. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Chair Gomez. Oh, and thank you, Chair Hornstein. This is a very good bill, and I'm really glad to see the historic investment in public transit. My district is heavily reliant on public transit because there's a significant percentage of folks who cannot afford to purchase a vehicle, and so I want to thank you for that. And then obviously, you know, I want us to step back a little bit and think about what we're doing here, right? Because we have to pay for the things that we care about. And you know, today, I mean, I just want to go back to this delivery fee that we've been talking about a lot. Because I've heard that, you know, it'll tax poor folks, but I've also heard that, I mean, from other folks that it will tax retailers. And I think to me, if consumers are paying for part of a convenience that they're receiving and producers or retailers are paying for that, that's actually probably pretty good tax policy that's not being passed entirely onto consumers. So I just want to be very clear about like what we're saying here, because we've been getting conflicting testimony from, you know, folks in the witness stand. So, you know, for me, like I actually think, you know, we should also look at the big picture, because the food delivery industry, right, is an industry that's worth $150 billion a year. And I think it is a very innovative approach to an industry that will cause wear and tear to the roads and infrastructure that we already don't fund. So I appreciate I want to say like the courage of Chair Cagle and Chair Hornstein to think about ways to fund a public good that we all use and that this industry has excessively used and is projected to continue to excessively use. I also want to note there already is a convenience fee that we pay, right? I order from Target, I pay a fee there. I order from DoorDash and I pay at least you know, $3 and pay a little more when I want a rush order, right? And so I want us to think about you know, what we're actually saying here, because this fee already does exist for people who are able to access this convenience, and perhaps, you know, if we are accessing public goods, you know, we should be paying for that, right? And just it's a direct line for consumers to think more about their impact on their communities and also the environment when they consume things. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Hornstein. I think this might be a question for you or for staff, but one of the testifiers said that there seems to be some confusion about whether the delivery fee is taxable in statute versus how it's being treated in the bill. Could we just get some clarity on that?
Yeah, thank you for that. We'll go to Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Robbins, so in the underlying bill, not in the A31 amendment, there is a provision to exclude the retail delivery fee from sales price as sales tax is calculated. So even though other delivery fees may be subject to sales tax, this one would not be.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. And so no further change in other areas of statute is necessary?
Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Robbins, I don't believe so. If the department has administrative feedback, possibly after the hearing, I would take a look at that, but I think this would cover it.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Ms. Hagel, and thank you for that. I find there's a lot of confusion about how this is going to impact businesses. And so the more clarity I think we can get as this continues to progress, I would really appreciate. So appreciate everyone who's going to work on that. Secondly, going back to the delivery fee, which is of great concern to me. Another testifier tended to talk about that and talking about the regressivity of the sales tax and how that's not really that bad. But I just want the committee to fully appreciate the regressivity of this delivery fee. Sales taxes are based on the volume of your purchase. So the more you purchase, the higher the sales tax. This, if a low-income family is, getting a small delivery, they're paying that 75 cents, the same as if you're having, a bunch of furniture delivered and you're paying the 75 cents. So this fee is going to impact low-income families much more and seniors much more. I think of seniors I know in my life who, someone who lives in an assisted living place and they have to get their meds delivered. They are not, living excessively, and this is going to severely impact them. And so I hope that we will not be so cavalier about this delivery fee and the impacts it's going to have. And I see the chair wants to respond. I have one more point because I know you'll want to respond to this, Chair. In general, the tenor of the discussion has been, well, we need to raise all these taxes, but then we'll just create all these other funds to offset the impact on low-income families. And I don't think that's the right direction economically for our state. We don't want to impose all these taxes and then just say, well, we'll help the people who are adversely affected by creating another housing fund or another Meals on Wheels program or an EV credit to offset the tax that Bjorn talked about on expensive vehicles. Members, that is not an efficient way to run an economy, and we continue to keep driving in that direction by creating new levels of dependency while we're creating new levels of taxation. And as a whole, that's really not a great way to drive innovation, to attract investment, to attract talent to our state. So in a broad sense, what we're doing here and what we're doing in the bills we saw earlier is not in the best interests of our state in our long-term economic growth. And I just hope that we will take a step back and consider that. So, Mr. Chair, I look forward to your response.
Yeah, I just will note before we go to Chair Hornstein that medication is exempt from sales tax, so it wouldn't trigger the delivery fee. But Chair Hornstein.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just really think that's important to underscore. Chair Cagle mentioned it in her testimony, and let's just be very, very clear. Medicine is exempt. There are a number of other items in this amendment that we put on today that are directly the result of feedback we got related to small businesses. There's also no EV credit, Representative Robbins. I'm not sure you had mentioned that there's an EV credit in this bill. It's not, that doesn't exist here either. We do have a fee that was put on in several transportation bills ago, a $75 fee for on EV purchases. So I just think it's important. We need to sift through the items and respond to areas of both disagreement and confusion. But let's be very, very clear on some of these matters. And so when we repeat this information that is false about medicines, that's just not helpful, and I wanted to be very clear on the record on that.
Thank you. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I must have missed that part when I was out with a constituent, but I do not want to spread any misinformation, and I appreciate that clarification. I do think, to my broader point, things that seniors in assisted living facilities get delivered will be taxed, and I do think that's a hardship. To the point about the EV credit, also to provide clarity, that I agree it's not in this bill. It's in a different bill the committee heard earlier. And I just think we have to look more holistically at all these different taxes and credits that we keep providing across the breadth of what the committee is considering this session. Thank you.
And on that, we are in alignment that we need to take a hard look at all of kind of the system as it is altogether. Representative Elkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've heard a lot of discussion today about what people don't like, but we labor under a constitutional framework that anticipates that transportation will be funded not from the general fund, but from primarily through a fund called the Highway User Tax Distribution Fee Fund, which, as the name implies, is intended to be populated using money generated by user fees. So when we demonize the primary user fee that was originally in place when this Constitution was enacted a century ago, and you leave it to our imaginations to come up with alternative user fees, this is what you get. So I listened with interest to Representative Bjorn's extolling all of the virtues, the transparency of the gas tax. And I'm hoping that, 2 years from now, he and I can work together on a bill that actually increases that tax. The last time we increased the gasoline tax was 2008, and even at that time, we had understood that it was only filling a third of the gap that was known to exist at that time. So this is, again, you demonize the one efficient, the gas tax only costs us like 0.2% of revenues to collect. It's fair, it's efficient, it's effective. When we take that off the table, this is what you get. Thank you.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make a couple quick comments about the delivery fee. This is really, besides hurting the consumer, this is a huge mandate on businesses of all size, small, anyone that does over $1 million in revenue. The businesses themselves, this would require them to update or change completely their point of sale system, which is thousands and thousands of dollars, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. There are about 3% of every sale is credit card fees. So you're asking businesses to automatically lose 3% of this delivery charge for everything that they're doing. There's accounting fees. There's monthly remittance to the sales tax. There's a concern about whether or not you've hit that trigger of the $100,000 or whatever, and then what point do you start collecting it? And if you didn't do it, in February, but you realize you're going to hit the trigger, then do you have to make up those dollars, to revenue? So there are it's very, very erroneous for companies, for businesses. But I have some specific questions on the sales tax. That is the largest chunk of this additional dollars. Maybe if there's someone from Metro Transit or Met Council, I'm curious about the division between, I guess, trips by car or vehicle and trips by transit. Does anyone have those numbers? I know I've read them, and I know it's very small. Is there anyone here that could answer that?
I don't see anybody getting up so I don't know that we have a Metro Transit person here.
Okay. Okay.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm guessing it's, 1 or 2% or below that's actually done through transit. And as a reminder, buses run on roads. And roads generally, except for collectors, are paid by local governments, local units of government through property taxes and so on. And in certain cities, some cities have better roads than others. Bridges, of course, are typically state issues. My concern is that of this $1 billion a year in the 3/4 cent sales tax, 85% of it, or 83% of it, is going to the Met Council for transit. And Met Council, of course, is an entity that is, the last legislative auditor report came out on that, has shown that they are a disaster fiscally in managing tax dollars. But 83% of the dollars, and the vast majority, 2/3 of the additional $1.5 billion per year in taxes that are being proposed in this bill are going to transit. That is a tiny, tiny proportion of the vehicles amount. And I think it's going to continue to shrink as people have more work from home, as there's less trips, inside the metro area. People are leaving, we've looked at the population numbers. They're leaving Hennepin and Ramsey County. They've had net outflow of population. It's just, to me, our things are not aligned. This is a way, because the gas tax is constantly dedicated to roads, this sales tax is a way to push money into transit, the vast majority into transit. My understanding, Mr. Chair, is that we are able, this bill also allows the Met Council to bond using this dedicated sales tax revenue. Is that correct? And then if so, maybe the author or someone can tell me how much, $500 million or I guess more than that, almost close to $1 billion a year in sales tax revenue, what that would buy in bonds, then what is the intention? Is that to build out a bus rapid transit line, to build out more light rail? I guess those are my questions. Where's all this money going? $1 billion a year.
Representative Hornstein.
Madam Chair and Representative Anderson, yes, there is bonding capacity, and we typically do that in a lot of our transportation revenue. We have increased bonding capacity for roads and bridges as a result of this legislation. So the $500,000 here, we do, I thought it was very important to actually list out the preferred areas in which we want this money to be spent. So, first and foremost, it's our local buses. And, some of you may know I don't drive, and so I do take the bus very regularly. And so the route I take downtown is the number 17 bus. And I will tell you that in rush hour, it's standing room only. People are using and utilizing our local bus system. They're coming back post-COVID. And by the way, we do have a study of post-COVID transportation trends. What we do know is that the buses and the arterial rapid buses that you mentioned, Representative Anderson, are doing well. These are very popular, and we want to build out that system, not only in the core areas, but also suburban communities. The other thing that we're going to fund is new and innovative, and it comes to us from the southern suburbs. Minnesota Valley and Southwest transit have pioneered, I think, national models for what we call micro-transit. So when you take a bus to your final destination and you still need to go 1 or 2 more miles, you can, through an app or a phone call, make sure that there is a smaller vehicle waiting for you to take you to your final destination. And of course, there'd be opportunities to do that even if you're not transferring from another form of transit. So this is innovative. It's the future. This is, again, it's the basic kinds of things. Bus shelters. Someone had mentioned having to climb up over snowbanks to get to a bus. We have a fiscal cliff for our bus system coming in a couple of years, which I think would be very, very detrimental to our core transit systems. And so that is really, our intention. Electrification of our bus system is very important. Transportation is the #1 source of greenhouse gas emissions. And so being able to give people options and choices, so many people don't have that choice. College students, commuters, people who are reliant on transit for whatever reason, can't drive, don't want to drive, need that choice. It also helps the motoring public, that I'm not driving, I can tell you that. But it also helps the motoring public with congestion relief. So there are so many advantages to transit. Our most successful regions in the country and in the world have solid transit systems. A lot of young people make their decisions about where to live and where to work based on the availability of good public transit. So this is a strong investment. You look at the investment overall transportation budget, when you look at all the different sources of funding, still 80 to 85% goes to roads and bridges, 15% goes to transit. That will change slightly as a result of this bill. But we need to have, I will just say in conclusion here, we need to have a transportation system where all modes and all parts of the state are covered so that everybody benefits from these investments. So I want to maybe ask Mr. Lee to get to the core of Representative Anderson's question around what is the actual bonding capacity that is leveraged here and what are its uses.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee.
Chair.
Madam Chair and members, the estimate for increased revenue as a result of a portion of the 0.75 metropolitan area sales tax, specifically for transit, is estimated to be about $464 million in the first fully phased-in year, and then grow to about $492 million a year in fiscal 2027. So between about $460 million a year to just under $500 million a year. In terms of how much debt service that could support for bonds, for state debt, once it's fully sold and phased in, there's a rough estimate that about 10% of the total principal outstanding is the annual debt service payment. So in theory, it could be as high as about $4 billion if that entire sales tax were to $4 to $5 billion if that entire sales tax were used to support debt service and not operating or any other or cash improvements. But I should caveat that that's with state bonding. It doesn't factor in a subunit of government that might not have the credit rating of the state or structure debt service the same way. And I should also note that is assuming about a 20-year bond payout. So a longer bond payout could potentially fit more debt.
Thank you. Representative Anderson.
Thank you. So, and thank you for those numbers. So close to $5 billion could be funded in transit dollars through bonding, which I suspect is the plan. So,
Madam Chair, Representative Anderson, yes, if the Metropolitan Council decided to do all bonding. And again, these are rough estimates. I'd have to confirm with the Metropolitan Council, but that would be about the ratio of the state debt service on comparable trunk highway bonds or GO debt.
Okay.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you. That's all.
Great. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a general question about transit. I've heard analogies in the past of, with like the North Star line with that train that, we could probably, essentially, lease like a Tesla, most expensive Tesla for the person and still save money for taxpayers if we did that instead of shutting that line. Is there any ideas on the amount of support? It sounds like it's very popular to ride buses in the metro, like what the cost would be if you actually charge the cost of that per rider to make it self-sufficient so it wouldn't need cross support. Do we know any of those numbers?
Chair Hornstein.
Madam Chair, just to be clear, are you talking about the local bus per subsidy per passenger? I think it's, again, I would defer perhaps to Mr. Lee or others, but I think it's a.
Oh, he's trying to leave.
We get a good return, but it's a couple dollars per passenger for the local buses. And I think we get our best bang for our buck on that one, but I think Mr. Lee may have better numbers.
Mr. Lee.
This is the local Metro Transit system.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, I would have to double check, but the fare box recovery ratio of local bus service has been between about 25% to about 33%. That depends on what level the fare is set at and certain service characteristics of the bus route. So it again would depend on the total cost of the route, how much total fare would be. But for an example, if about 1/3 of the operating cost is $1, then it would be an increase of $2 to have the total increase. But again, I would have to double check on those specifics.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So if I understand you, so let's say the fare is $1 to ride someplace. You're saying that the person who's actually riding the bus pays 33 cents of the real cost of that?
Typically, yes.
Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, if the fare, the person pays whatever the fare rate is at, and then the total cost of providing that service in the past is the fare box recovery ratio, or that percentage has been between about 25 to 33%.
Okay.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Lee, what kind of underpayment? So we've heard stories of folks with the rail line here on University that actual fare box recovery is 33% of the cost. I'm guessing that's more. But folks that just aren't paying, do we track that at all as far as enforcement and things like that?
Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, I would have to ask the Metropolitan Council about that. I know they've done reports on that topic in the past.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Representative Swedzinski.
And then to Chair Hornstein, is there any, it sounds like from, the testimony here that those are very popular options for people to use the bus routes and things like that. Is there any increase in the cost of the ridership? Rather, we're raising fees on everybody else. Are we raising the cost of actually using these convenient modes of transportation?
You're asking about fare increases. Chair Hornstein.
We don't, in terms of the fare that is charged per passenger, that is a function of, the regional transit agencies across the state. So in the metropolitan area, that's the Metropolitan Council, that's the opt-out providers, and then we have different providers throughout greater Minnesota. Rochester, Duluth, St. Cloud all have their own transit systems, and so those are independently governed.
Representative Swedzinski.
What are the conversations like? Have you floated that, Chair Hornstein, to them to say, rather than the state come in and charge everybody else more, why don't we, the people that actually utilize it, to pay, maybe more of their fair share of that?
Chair Hornstein.
Well, those are local discussions that take place, within these transit systems, and we want to incent people to ride transit. It's very, very important, part of our transportation system, and that's clearly what our bill is doing by giving people choices.
Madam Chair, is there anyone in that works with these groups that, what would that do if they were to raise the rates for transit and things, what that might do to ridership? Is there anyone in the room?
Chair Hornstein.
Well, we know ridership suffers when that happens. That has been historically the case. Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski.
Yeah. As we mentioned, I don't believe there's a representative from Metro Transit here. Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just checking to see in case anyone seems to be that they're potentially going to benefit quite a bit from this bill. And this would be a question to someone on the sales tax portion. Representative Robbins talked a little bit about the medical stuff. So if in this situation, if let's say I'm an older person that needs a salve as part of my medication, that part is not sales taxable. But if I need to buy a pack of Q-tips to apply that salve, would I have to pay a delivery fee then on that and be charged that as an elder person?
Chair Hornstein. Or you're looking about.
Just see if Representative Cagle.
Yeah, maybe we'll go to Ms. Hagler on that question.
Yeah, that might be one for Ms. Hagler.
Madam Chair and Representative Swedzinski, so I didn't catch what the other thing was that you said, but if a person purchases something that's tax exempt along with something that is taxable, then there would be a fee. And so if it's a prescription medication or over-the-counter medication that is tax exempt, but they purchase another item that is taxable, then the fee would apply.
Okay.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so it does sound like they'll in all likelihood, folks aren't, just ordering a medication, or if it's a salve, they're saying, hey, I need a Q-tip to apply that salve, or a tongue depressor, or whatever that might be. So it sounds like 9 times out of 10, the folks will likely be paying this increased fee on top of it, just from a practicality standpoint. And then, one of the other questions that I was brought up, Representative Olson talked a little bit about that increase. Like if you have an electric vehicle, did you say that with these increases in tab fees, that if you bought an electric car that you would on average pay like $4,000 more than other states, or was it $4,000 in total? I wanted to clarify what that cost would be.
I have never had a member ask another member a question in a committee. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but Representative Olson.
He will yield. He will yield, Madam Chair. So what I was talking about is, so the average price of an electric vehicle, $60,000, about, maybe give or take a couple $100. If you were to purchase it in the state of Iowa, you would pay 4% sales tax, which is $2,400. If you were to buy it in the state of Minnesota with a 6.875% sales tax, you would be paying $4,125 in sales tax to the state of Minnesota. A very patriotic Minnesotan gift of $1,725 if you were to in fact choose to do your own home state the service of providing that extra tax. If you were to purchase it in South Dakota, though, you would have to bring it, if you do in fact live in Minnesota, you would register it here, and then you would pay the increased registration fee, which would be nearly $1,000 for that vehicle if in fact it was 1 year old and you registered it here. So you're looking at like $5,000 the first year in state sales tax and registration fees. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Thanks for allowing me to yield to that question.
Absolutely. Representative Stinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize. I'm new here. I appreciate I appreciate that, Representative Olson. So it's my estimate. So on average, if you're buying an electric vehicle, and it sounds like the reason for some of those increased fees is because, hey, people are buying less gas-powered vehicles. That's why we need to do this. And, if you combo that, if we just lived in a vacuum and this bill was being passed by itself, we'd say, you know what, we are going to make a difference. And say, you know what, when people are buying an electric car, we're going to make sure they pay their fair share. But, sadly, this committee doesn't work in a vacuum. I believe it was our Attorney General, Keith Ellison, when XL was proposing a $7,500 stipend to folks that buy an electric vehicle through their rate case, said, you know what, that is a inappropriate place because it is exceptionally regressive. You're going to have people of color, you're going to have single mothers through their higher rates, through higher electrical rates, supplement the purchase of electric vehicles for yuppie, he might not have used that word, but yuppie purchasers, and propose more predominantly white. And so that in combination, so we're going to have more money being charged them, and all they simply do is they transfer that extra cost through your bill to ratepayers because they're going to receive a bill that you already passed of a $7,500 electric vehicle rebate that they're going to receive. So those folks aren't going to pay their fair share. They're not going to pay an increased amount. It's the ratepayers in your districts that are going to pay this extra cost. Does that make sense? So, if these things operated by themselves, it's going to be the rate folks. It's going to be that single mother. It's going to be that low-income family trying to get by. They're going to pay the extra cost of all these costs. It's going to get passed on to them. And I get it. So in reality, 9 times out of 10, we're going to see folks that are buying a medical device with a Q-tip or a salve stick or whatever it might be, going to actually pay this fee. We're going to see the cost of this increase on electric vehicles get passed on to ratepayers, essentially through other bills that this committee has passed. And foundationally, it was brought up by the Retailers Association, the grocers and the rest, to say, you know what, this 75 cents, when we charge a credit card fee, that's 3% off the top plus the actual cost that they have to administer this. Government always makes sure that they get theirs. So when they're going to have an extra employee or 3 to administer this program that's going to be wildly huge compared to the rest of the country, they get theirs. But the retailers have just talked, and when they gave their testimony in committee, they said, this is going to cost us. At the end of the day, after we spend the money on extra staff, extra computer programs that are heavy to administer, there might be 50 cents left of that 75% cost. I mean, Representative Hornstein, would you at least consider that if this fee of 75 cents per delivery fee, that those companies could actually charge the state or at least remit the money that's left over after their actual costs of implementing it, so that they're not actually footing the bill for this, and so that they don't have to carry the weight of taxpayers and ratepayers and the rest on top of those extra fees? Would you consider that as an option in this bill?
Madam Chair, I know, as Representative Cagle has, this is not, there's a phase-in period, correct, on this? No? Okay. Well, I mean, I do think that, but there is a delay in terms of the, so, I think that is a good question, and I think that could be, addressed as we move forward, because, again, we're not going to have this, fully operational in the first year.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you. So Representative Hornstein and Representative Cagle, no, I'm not going to ask your question, but I'm just saying I would like to work with you in potentially crafting an amendment with the retailers and with those folks that if that's going to move forward, that they have the ability to recapture their real costs, so that they, as business owners, as small mom and pop shops, just trying to get by, trying to provide jobs in their community. I mean, I look at the news, folks, and you look at this fee and how it's going to affect your communities. And one of the things I'm noticing at Brooklyn Center, which is a city just outside of Minneapolis, they just sent word that a Walmart that was built just 5 short years ago, their Walmart's going to close. And I understand there may be some political ramifications of why that is closing and what's going on in that community. But those customers are going to have less. We hear about groceries, we hear about grocery deserts. I've heard of all these questions that those folks in those communities where we're seeing retail pull back because they can't make it work, whether that from whatever reason that might be, some folks call that product shrinkage, that those retailers are closing. And so those communities are foundationally going to be seeing less and less opportunities to have brick and mortar opportunities to do their shopping. And they're going to see a growing amount of weight put on their shoulders when they're ordering online and having those items delivered to their door. And, I would ask I just don't, I think a medium ground would be at least let retailers recoup those costs of actually implementing it. But I think this is an egregious example of things that we shouldn't do. And when we look at other states just a year ago, having passed something that's quite smaller and having exceptional difficulty doing it, that maybe you should take a pause for a year or two and look at what's the end up product that they come up with after they realize they made some huge mistakes, and pass that, not repass with the mistakes that they've done, and just give it a couple years to see how they fix it, and then do that rather than waste a lot of taxpayers and retailers' time. So thank you.
All right. Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank everybody for the very thorough discussion. I missed Transportation Committee, and I feel like I'm back in it. I could almost answer the question that I think people were trying to get to about how much we subsidize bus fares, and I think it really is about less than $2 a rider, like you said. And I want us to get back to the tax discussion around this table instead, and also to thank you. You've been sounding the alarm bell on this for quite a while, and it's not just been you, it's been engineers that look at our system from across the country. The gas tax is declining in its effectiveness because, thank God, we are doing more hybrid and electrical vehicles. We haven't raised, it's been raised once, I think, since 1988, and that's just because a bridge fell down. So to me, that is what's shameful. This is a public investment that we make. It's a public good. And I hope people understand, if they haven't been on transportation, that you don't fund a system in one-time money and expect it to work. It just doesn't. And we have had a deficit spending on transportation for decades. And that has to change. And it was kind of fortuitous today that we had all three bills together here between housing and education and transportation, because it's not just the human infrastructure, but the physical infrastructure of our state and our economy that we're talking about. It's making those investments to make our economy grow, our investments in our kids so that we have a qualified workforce going forward, our investment in making sure our workforce has a roof over their heads so they can continue to work, even though people should know that about 75% of our people that are in shelters right now still have a full-time job. That will tell you how unaffordable our housing stock is. It's essential to make investments in those just as much as it's essential to make investments in our physical infrastructure, because that's what moves our goods and services and our employees. And I love all the talk about a new car. We're shopping for a new car right now, but only because our son, who's a teacher, is driving a 2003. No, it's a 2001 that is, however, has 250,000 miles on, and he's at the end of his rope. He has a teacher's salary. His soon-to-be wife, as of Saturday, is going to be still trying to finish up veterinarian school, which is more expensive than medical school and pays about a third less. So they're going to be in debt for a while. They can't afford a new car. They can't afford a 5-year-old car. We're going to give them my almost 5-year-old car. So then we're going to pay for those extra fees unless we choose as a consumer, which consumers have a choice, to go to another state to buy a car. So those are real things. But I also feel very privileged that we have the opportunity to even consider that. Because we all know what we make here, and my husband's a teacher. So it's a stretch. It's a stretch for us. But I also want to frame and think about the stretch for people that are transit dependent, that don't have roofs over their heads, don't have opportunities besides their local public schools that we need to invest in. And I know people have been really focused on the fee. My daughter's from Denver. In fact, she's in town for the wedding, and they have the fee in Denver. And I asked her, have you noticed it? And she's like, well, no, because we decide when we're going to buy stuff, we bundle it. I had to ask a friend. I haven't had groceries delivered to my house since our now 26-year-old was 2. So I was like, I don't even know how much that costs or if there's a fee. So I asked a friend, and they're like, they sent me a picture because they were getting Hy-Vee delivered today. $9.95. There's a fee. Our grocers are already charging the fees for delivery. They figured out how to do this. And I kind of like what Representative Elkins said. When we take the gas tax off the table, when we take that off the table, you have to be creative, and this is what you get. But I also like how folks were talking about holistically, because, in education finance, I do have the heartburn of transferring something from that goes to the general fund right now. Members, remind you, 40% of our education is that general fund. 40% of our general fund is education dollars. So it's worrisome to transfer that auto parts sales to the roads. But I've warmed up to it over time, and it makes sense, and I've warmed up to it because we're also making investments in education this year. Indexing that formula to inflation gives that same stability for our schools moving forward. So this all does work together. But unless we start investing in our physical infrastructure, it's going to make a lot harder for our human infrastructure going forward, and a lot harder for our economy. So thank you, both Representative Cagle and for Representative Hornstein, for seeing the whole picture, for seeing the picture of our roads crumbling over the last few decades and deciding we need to finally get creative here. Because you know what? I still will go back to what my parents taught me. You get what you pay for. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. Chair Hornstein, in subdivision 5 of the articles, line 60.1 and following, it talks about a prohibition of using the sales tax revenue on Southwest Light Rail. you and I share some serious frustration over this project. And the language does say that that prohibition expires on the expiration of the Metropolitan Governance Task Force, and then it cites to some articles. So I don't know if you know or if staff could tell us when that expiration is. Is it just at the end of this current session, or is it some other time?
Chair Hornstein.
Madam Chair, I can answer that, yes. The goal here is that we have and this isn't necessarily the purview of the committee, but because it relates to the sales tax, I think it's appropriate to say that we, on a bipartisan basis, I believe, have more momentum now than ever before to make a very significant reform and restructuring of the Metropolitan Council. And so what we've done is set up a task force to do just that. We set out a few options. Obviously, any option is on the table, but you could elect it. You could have a council of governments where you have local governments governing this metropolitan planning organization. There's other options too, combinations of these things. So we also have 2 more legislative auditor reports coming in the next year, including one very specific to finance. And so I felt that between the additional work of the auditor on Southwest, the governance piece of the council, that those things really should be in place. Our ability to actually, it's on us as a legislature, and you've been wonderful, Representative Robbins. I appreciate your support of Met Council reform. It's on us as a legislature to change this, and we better get it done in 2024. And so I feel that with all of these moving parts in place, there should be a prohibition, and hopefully then with a new structure, that new entity could figure out. There's lots of options we could do. You could cap it at a certain amount like we do with state support for light rail. But I think having that 1 year plus prohibition was the responsible thing to do at this point.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that, Chair Hornstein. So that is supposed to expire in 2024?
Yeah, it would be, I believe, and House Research can correct me, that I believe that is we give this task force, we'll give some recommendations that's envisioned towards the beginning of 2024, and then we would have the 2024 cycle of this biennium to really get this governance piece down. And I will tell you, and I'll say it on the record, it would be very problematic after all of this if this legislature can't agree on some very significant governance reform and restructuring of the Metropolitan Council by around a year from now. That's the hope, that's the vision, and I know that we'll be working together on that, Representative Robbins.
Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to clarify on the record, so this specifies the sales tax revenue, but also the bonding authority could not be used for Southwest Rail before this task force expires?
That would be the legislative intent. If we need to work on language, I'm happy.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any further member discussion? If not, we'll go to Representative Davids to wrap us up, hopefully.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And a little quiz for my good friend, the Transportation Chair. What year was the largest infusion of transportation dollars put in the last 30 years?
Chair Hornstein, I suspect the follow-up question will be who the tax chair was at that time, but I don't want to ruin things. Chair Hornstein.
Am I that predictable?
Well, there was, you may be getting at the auto parts, 50% auto parts sales tax, which was a transfer. It wasn't new revenue. But that would have been in 2017, I believe.
Representative Davis.
And thank you, Madam Chair. And I almost felt like my good friend Lynn Carlson there for a while, giving a little history lesson here. Representative Carlson could go back like 40-some years and tell us what happened. It was amazing. But I've been working with Dr. Rick on that so I don't become like my parents. There was the word demonized used. I don't think anybody's demonizing anything. Demonic is a very, very serious word. We're not demonizing this bill. We just think it's horrible, regressive, taxes the poorest of the poor. That's not demonic. That's fact. And when you mentioned, Chair Hornstein, about when I brought my report cards home to my parents with a D+, a C, and a C-, my reaction was always, I passed. I mean, that's, I passed, and that's a good thing. And when I looked at my diploma, I just had to make sure it was signed. Maybe if staff could help me out here, because we've been hearing conflicting items here. If with the delivery tax or fee, whatever you want to call it, would the suits index show that as regressive or progressive? Maybe Ms. Schill or Templin or?
I suspect that neither Ms. Templin nor Ms. Schill wants to attempt to do the work of the tax incidence study ahead of the Department of Revenue, but Ms. Templin?
Madam Chair, Representative Davids. As far as I know, the Department of Revenue's analysis covers state and local taxes. I would have to check with the Department of Revenue to see what coverage the analysis has in terms of fees.
Well, thank you. Madam Chair, maybe Ms. Bears could come down, because this is kind of an important question. And the question is the delivery fee regressive or progressive?
It's like Ms. Bears is coming down.
Yes. Just a simple, it's regressive or it's progressive would be fine.
Welcome back to the committee, Ms. Bears.
Madam Chair, Representative Davids, I would have to ask our task research folks and get back to you on that one.
Well, you don't have to get back to me, because I know a suits index shows delivery fees or such fees as regressive, very regressive. We've been having several testifiers try to talk us out of the fact that that's a regressive fee, and we're supposed to be trying to help the poor here, not hurt them, and we're definitely hurting them. I heard the chair, I heard several folks in their testimony saying that it is not regressive. Well, it is regressive. And then I heard someone say that they don't like raising taxes. Well, if you don't like it, don't do it. It's like me saying I don't like passing on dessert, so I don't do it. You don't have to do these things, but that's what we're doing. In fact, it's just amazing to me how we had an $18 billion surplus. Not only have we'll be spending that, but also an additional $7.3 billion, and we haven't even received our tax bill yet. We haven't even seen that yet. So, members, I just, Chair Hornstein, there's just so many tax increases and fees. All I could do was WWRD. What would Raphael do? And Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, and Chairman Hornstein, I don't know what he'd do on this. What do you think?
Chair Hornstein.
Madam Chair, maybe this is a transition to the conclusion here? Or?
I would hope
Let's
so,
hope
Chair
so.
Hornstein.
I'm hungry.
I think my friend Raphael and many others would disagree with you that a D plus is a somehow acceptable passing, simply passing, having a passing grade is acceptable. And that is really the core of this discussion. I'm glad you framed it that way, Lead Davids. A D plus is not acceptable, simply not acceptable. The status quo is not acceptable for purposes of safety, for purposes of commerce, for purposes of mobility, for purposes of economic opportunity. That's what a transportation system is all about, a multimodal transportation system. And Representative Chair Joachim, I thought, said it so well, that ultimately this is about people. It's not simply about infrastructure. It's about the people, all of us, that use the transportation system every day. So this is our opportunity to make history. This is our opportunity to make the kind of history that the federal government has made over the years. The New Deal was transformative, members. And while I have my problems with how the interstate highway system has manifested itself, particularly in our core cities, that was a commitment that President Eisenhower made. And we haven't had that in so long. Chair David's 2008 under Chair Leader, that was the only time in 30 years that we actually raised new revenue for transportation. In 3 decades, we haven't done this. So, members, this is the time, this is the moment, because we are at the cusp of something very important, not only in Minnesota, but around the country, as we make this transition, hopefully, out of this pandemic. It is really our core infrastructure that needs our help, that needs our support. I want to thank each and every member from both sides of the aisle for a very, very informative and helpful discussion, as these bills are always works in progress. And so I think some really good suggestions were made, and we will take those to heart as this moves forward. I ask for your support, and again, thank you very much for a great discussion today. Please vote yes.
All right, seamless transition. We may never know how Raphael would vote on this bill, but we will find out how the members of this committee will vote.
See him for Passover.
Madam Chair, he didn't answer my question.
Raphael would support this. He's probably a little more moderate than I am, but I think he would support infrastructure because it's really something that everyone should agree on.
Representative David.
Well, Madam Chair, after all, he did read Time Magazine.
The clerk will take the roll. The chair votes aye. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to say the thing. The chair renews her motion that House File 2887, the first engrossment as amended, be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. The clerk will take the roll. The chair votes aye.
Chair Gomez, aye. Vice Chair Norris.
Aye.
Chair Norris, aye. Minority Lead Davids.
No.
Lead Davids, no. Representative Agbaje.
Aye.
Agbaje, aye. Representative Anderson.
No.
Anderson, no. Representative Brand.
Yes.
Brand, yes. Representative Elkins.
Elkins, aye.
Elkins, aye. Representative Howard.
Aye.
Representative Howard, aye. Representative Joy, excused. Representative Koznick, excused. Representative Lee.
Aye.
Lee, aye. Representative List-Lagarde, excused. Representative Olson, B.
No.
Olson, B, no. Representative Olson, L, excused. Representative Pinto.
Aye.
Pinto, aye. Representative Robbins.
No.
Robbins, no. Representative Smith.
Aye.
Smith, aye. Representative Swedzinski.
No.
Swedzinski, no. Representative Wiener, excused. Representative Whitty.
No.
Whitty, no. Representative Youakim.
Aye.
Youakim, aye. Madam Chair, there are 10 ayes, 6 nays, and 5 members excused.
There being 10 ayes and 6 nays, the motion prevails, and House File 2887, the first engrossment as amended, is re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee. So, members, thanks so much for a great conversation today. Appreciate everybody being here. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, April 11th, and we're going to meet at 9 a.m. rather than our normal time. We'll be in touch, and everybody have a great break. We are adjourned.